What's up, guys? I am D2. I am joined on the podcast by Tiggy Maximus Prime.
That's me. That's
UFC
me.
2, that is him. UFC 299 just went down last Saturday, and there were fireworks. Tiggy Max, I believe, who did you pick for Caitlin Chukagian and Maycee Barber?
I had picked Caitlin Chukagian. I thought she was going to beat Maycee Barber. Um, it was a good fight. It was a little bit back and forth, but again, Maycee Barber really impressed me, and I think she got the last two rounds after having a bit of a very contested first round. Um, it was a good fight. Uh, I was really thinking that Macy may not be able to match up with Chukagan, but I I think Macy Barber is doing something right, and every single time I go against her, I'm always wrong.
Yeah, I think that Maycee Barber is not one to be trifled with inside of her division. I mean, there's power in those hands, and I am impressed by how she is evolving within the mixed martial arts game.
Oh yeah,
I think she's a powerhouse. She's got strong legs, and so especially when people are trying to get her to the ground, they find that that is easier said than done. And she is obviously, as I've stated, a powerhouse on the feet. So with her striking, she gets things done. And I think that's going to be the kind of the tell of her story
yeah.
from now until the end of time. Getting her down is going to be rough, and she can strike. So how do you get her down? One, and then two, if you can't, how do you strike with Maycee Barber? And I'm pretty sure that I went with Maycee for the win on this one.
You did.
So you know, uh, at least there's one in the bucket for D2.
Oh yeah.
Was there anything specific about that fight that you noticed? Anything that really stood out to you or surprised you at all?
Just Macy Barber staying in the clinch and actually actively trying to get takedowns, actually. I'm just like blown away by that, considering how we first saw her and how she could not handle anyone that actually does grappling. But I'm impressed. It's nice to see her add that kind to that idea into her arsenal and not be simply one dimensional. She's actually a little more multifaceted. So I'm actually glad. She probably will do pretty well going forward.
Yeah, I mean, she's done well so far. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at her record, and she is definitely got a fairly pristine record. So I will say that I agree with you. I think that she's only getting better. I think that she's fairly young in the game,
Oh
and that
yeah.
just gives her all the potential in the world. Um, so congrats to Maycee Barber. Great fight to Caitlin Chukagian. Curtis Blades, Jouton Almeida. I thought it was a little bit disrespectful to have those guys on the, on a preliminary part of the card,
Yeah.
but I understand. I mean, the card was stacked one,
Yeah.
and you got to keep the fights exciting throughout the entire card.
Oh
And
yeah.
so having a fight that ended the way it ended, with a guy like Curtis Blades finishing off Jouton, I mean, I was definitely not expecting that. What did you think?
All he needed was one simple move, and that was just repeated elbows to the head because he was not taken. He was like always getting taken down by Almeida. I think they counted as nine, and it just seemed like that might have been just simply the only game plan, and it was working for Almeida. And then Curtis Blades realized that shoot, this guy is going to take me down again. But yet he held him up just long enough to realize, you know what? I have an opening here, and I'm just gonna simply elbow him in the head until he just crumbles, and he did. And then like the referee called it. I was just like surprised because I already had picked Almeida to win the fight. Had it gone a little bit differently in terms of being a little more, like a mixed bag of things to kind of do while standing up or try to do a ground game or simply strike. Like all we saw was go for takedown, try to find like top position or something like that. But to have 9 takedowns and then not do else other than just simply hold him down, but then like just repeatedly just ragdolling him. But I was like surprised that Curtis Blaze even won that fight because I was thinking he wasn't going to hang with Almeida.
You know, when power, speed, that is something that you kind of think is kind of an attribute of a Jouten Almeida fight, right? And not necessarily a Blades fight. Now, I'm not saying that he's not fast, but he's definitely more known for the power and his wrestling, right? He is great at that. And so a guy trying to take him down, as you can see, he stuffed it a few times, and then when it came down to it, he was able to finish, like you said, with the elbows. So the question is, how much of that is Jouten Almeida having a either not having a game plan that was going to be successful against Curtis, or how much of that was, we're just going to I see something that's happening and I'm going to throw everything else out of the window because trying to get Curtis Blades down to the ground wasn't working.
Yeah, but just to see that Curtis Blades really just he just saw something there, like, you know what, this is all I can work with, and he took a great advantage of that, and kudos to Curtis Blades for knowing how to adapt at that moment, knowing that his weakness was being exposed with the multiple takedowns and the fact that it seemed like he was getting beat at his own game too. And all of a sudden, well, if this is going to keep happening, I got to learn how to adapt right at this moment because you can't just simply let him keep taking you down and over again. And
No, you
yeah,
cannot.
kudos to Curtis Blades.
I mean, definitely shows that Curtis still belongs with the top of the division when it comes to the heavyweight. Now, when I'm saying the top of the division, I understand that Jotten Almeida is not, a top five guy. I don't even know if he's a top 10 guy right now, but we're still talking about a guy who, gave some of the top of the division. We're talking about the top three and top four guys runs for their money. So listen, I think that there's a lot to be said in getting a win over Jouton because again, he's a guy who could put your lights out. He's dangerous. He's scary, and that means something, right? When you're fighting fights that you should easily win, it just means a lot less than when you're fighting guys who are on streaks or are making other guys kind of wet their pants, moments before they get in the octagon with them. And I think that Jotten Almeida is a guy who will pay, if he can pick up DC as easily as he did, he can definitely do damage and do work inside that
Yeah,
octagon. So yes, definitely shout out to Blades because I definitely had Jouton. I thought that's the
yeah,
way it was going to go.
yeah. I was thinking tap out or at least make him go to sleep or something.
Next on the list was Piotr Jan against Song Yadong, and that fight was very interesting
It was.
because I think that we kind of likened that to something of uh, Piotr Jan being cannon fodder for a young up and comer, well, not even that young of an up and comer, but a guy who is on a heavy streak like Song Yadong. We just kind of really thought like, okay, like they're just feeding him to him, so he has a big name to push him towards get like say, hey, he's worth getting the gold.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
It was an interesting fight because you can make an argument that either Peter Yan or Song Yudong would actually win the fight by decision, but I did notice that Peter Yan was starting to get tagged up quite a bit throughout the fight. And then Peter Yan did manage to get some takedowns and got some few licks in there, but it was a good fight. But I was starting to think that Song Yudong was going to actually win by split decision, unanimous decision, but there's just something about Peter Yan and how he kind of did a little bit more in the second half of each round that might have stole a couple of rounds and that might have gave him the nod, and that's what the judges might have saw, like the second half of each of these rounds or just the second, third rounds. So
Mm.
I'm kind of glad that Peter Yan did get the victory, but it was not easy for him because it did seem like Song Yudong found some openings and he took advantage when he could. But I don't know. They might run this back actually.
They might.
It was
I
pretty
don't see
close.
a. Oh, it was definitely close. I mean, it was one of those fights that was so close that and it really could have went either way. And I'm not mad about it either way. Um, it was just one of the. It was a good fight. It didn't get overly bloody. It didn't get overly technical, in my opinion. It was just a good fight.
Yeah.
And good for the UFC because I'm sure they love having a guy like Piotr Jan at the top of the ticket, and I'm sure that they will do their best to get him back on the streak to get at least into title contention. So I think that is one way that they will definitely try to take that.
Oh yeah. I agree.
So Gilbert Burns, Jack Della, Madalena.
Oh man, that was amazing. Um, I was starting to feel that Gilbert Burns kind of figured out how to beat Jack. He was doing pretty well until the late third round where Jack was able to counter on the ground and he was able to finish off Gilbert Burns. And that was just amazing with like, what was it, just over a minute to go in the 30 rounds, I guess. So kudos to Madalena because I actually did pick him to win, but after watching what happened in the first 2.5 rounds, I was starting to feel that he finally met his match and somebody kind of exposed something about his fight game, but he was able to adapt late in the third round and he was able to counter and he got the advantage in position, and he ended up finishing off Gilbert Burns, who looked like he was just laid out after um, the last blow that he took from Jack.
You know, listen, I can only call it as I see it, and as I saw it in the beginning, it felt like Gilbert Burns was letting a guy who he could outclass in certain skills, right? Like I felt like he honestly could was it was better when obviously when it comes to wrestling. We don't need to question that.
Yeah.
And it felt like he had certain positions sewn up, and it felt like he didn't like fight to finish it in certain
Uh-huh.
aspects of it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like sometimes guys are so good at something but then they allow guys to stay in with them. And if I'm giving my wholehearted honest opinion, I felt like and I think it's a roundabout way of saying what you just said, that Gilbert Burns allowed Jack Della to stay in long enough to do what he did, but there were points where he had the advantage and he could have gotten Jack out of there, and you'll never get that back. Whether it's he was holding back, it just Jack's got the win now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it just felt like again when you have that momentum, you got to finish. And
Definitely.
so, what do you think that says? What do you think that says I mean, we know what it says for Jack Della Maddalena, because again, a name like Burns, being such a beloved fighter in the UFC, it definitely skyrockets you, right?
Definitely.
You heard them talk about the pop that he got in Miami. He speaking to Gilbert Burns, and they said, "Hey, like they love you here." And fight fans, true fight fans, they do love Gilbert Burns. They love who he's about as a human, and then they love what he's capable of doing in the octagon. So
Yeah.
again, we know what direction that pushes Jack Maddalena. But what does that say for a guy, who fought Kamaru Usman, and was TKO'd, and then has fought a guy like Hamzat Chimaev, and I believe that he won that fight. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I believe he won that fight. So you might say, hey, there's one for one there, but you're beating a guy who's still, for like true red-blooded MMA fans, are saying Hamzat Chimaev is still somewhat of an unknown, because the guys he's been fighting until he got to the Kevin Hollands and the Gilbert Burns, they weren't huge names, right?
Yeah.
What does this mean? What do you think this means for Gilbert Burns? With going up against a guy like Jack Della, and having the potential fight ending submissions, at least twice. What do you think this means for him, for Gilbert Burns?
The for Gilbert Burns, well, it does give him something else to look after as well, because you can now see in a few fights now where um, you can you can see that he can be finished within a fight. So there are certain things that Gilbert will have another tape to look at, and will put together some kind of resolution as to, okay, we know that these fighters fed off of my weaknesses, and I want to improve on this and prevent them from trying to do that again. But when it's putting together a fight strategy over a course of 15 minutes or 25, and it should help him recognize certain things that when you try to mimic this during training camp, that it'll actually help him try to fight off like counters like what Jack did, or try to fight off a potential like knockout punch from like Kamaru or something, or just simply
Mm,
just fight off a strong wrestler like Chimaev. I mean, like it gives him a lot of things to kind of look at, and then just have him just kind of try to put it all together so that when he fights again, that he'll be somewhat better prepared, knowing that a lot of these things can be thrown at him during a fight. But again, he'll still get some good fights in the division because he is somewhat a gatekeeper in at welterweight, because to really get really good at this division, no one who's at the top of the division, you really have to get through a guy like Gilbert Burns. And
mm,
if this is their way to get punch their ticket into the top four of the division, um,
hmm
I would say is a well-earned victory, and it does now give them a little bit of confidence to,
I think you make some good points there, and Gilbert Burns is what's interesting is he's so good at what he does,
yeah.
and I can't remember who I heard talk to this point, but they said they believe that Gilbert Burns may have fallen in love with the knockout, and
Mm.
it says something, right? Because
Yeah,
when you are so in love with the striking and the knockout, and what that brings, and don't get me wrong, again, most fans are looking for a knockout.
definitely. It's very
The
fun.
the organization is probably looking more for knockouts, because how many times do you ever hear, Dana White ever hand out a 50K bonus for whether it be a submission, It doesn't really happen. You don't hear about fight of the nights for guys who did a great submission or had it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the thing is that a lot of fighters who have gotten through the ranks have come up in high school and in college at being these like all-time great wrestlers, and then you get into the UFC or into like a Premier League, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, well, let's move towards this thing because it may make more money in some way, shape, or form behind the scenes, right? But if it's not getting you the wins on paper, you gotta sometimes rethink the game plan. I think that John Jones is
Definitely.
one of the greatest to ever do it because it was win by any means and win at any cost. So if
Yeah.
I can get you with a guillotine, I'm gonna get you with a guillotine. If it's an arm bar, it's an arm bar. But if I have to knock you out, I'm gonna do that. And
Uh,
more often than not, it was a guillotine or rear naked choke or it was a win by decision. But it was a win nonetheless.
yeah.
And that's the thing is like some of these guys are getting a little too far away from what is it what is it that got me to the show,
Mm,
and I don't. I mean, and I can't speak directly to Gilbert Burns, but it feels like a lot of them are just trying to please the crowd. And if you're gonna do that, you might suffer a few losses and a few devastating ones. But
yeah.
I digress, and we move on as we must to Kevin Holland, Michael Venom Page. Oh my goodness! I told
Yeah.
you that there were levels to this. What'd you think?
It was pretty awesome to see Venom actually come out to the Undertaker's intro. That was pretty awesome. And then threw off the cape, and then he started to make his way down to the octagon. He does have an interesting fight style. Um, I wasn't sure like why he kept his hands down for his fight style, but really threw off Kevin Holland quite a bit, and he was pretty elusive actually. And Kevin Holland had a lot of swings and misses, and I was impressed by Venom. Kevin Holland did get a takedown somewhere, but that I think that second round might have been the only thing great about for him during the fight. And Michael
Mm-hmm.
Venom just ended up like still picking apart Kevin Holland as much as he can because he knows that he was elusive. And I'm kind of curious to
Venom looked
see.
nervous at that point. He looked a
Yeah,
little nervous with that takedown.
oh yeah. So I'm kind of curious how Venom's gonna go against the rest of the guys at what is it, 170, 185. So.
Do you think that he sees success at 170?
With a few fighters, probably, but I don't know if that will work against someone like Leon Edwards or it might work on Kobe Covington, but I don't know if he could do it for very much a long time during that fight because I think Kobe Covington might end up doing something that would kind of allow him to adapt to that kind of fight style and maybe be able to hold down Michael Venom. I could kind of see that happening. Um, I don't know if it will
It's
work on
possible.
Bilal. I don't think it works on Bilal though. Or who's that one
I
guy? Romanov?
you don't think that Bilal gets more dazed and confused by a guy who moves like Michael Venom Page than Kevin Holland does?
Mm,
Now, I'm not saying that that isn't an exciting fight to watch. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is that you get a guy who moves like MVP does.
uh-huh.
Uh, I just see a guy like Bilal getting a little bit more dazed and confused when you have a guy who's going to move and be elusive at the same time, like MVP. Now, I'm hoping that he'll be a little less elusive in
Hmm.
his coming fights,
Yeah.
but definitely, it was. Listen, the spinning back elbow that landed on the shoulder of Kevin Holland,
Yeah.
and you could just see that I mean, one, the frustration on Kevin Holland's behalf because he wanted him to be a little bit more right in front of him,
Yeah.
and it's just like that's something that you have to plan for. And if you're not planning for, and I mean, there's enough footage on the planet of what MVP does and how he moves that should have been something that was talked about during the entire entirety of training camp, because
Yeah.
this isn't he's been in the fight game for 10 years and he's always fought this way and then changed it up in the UFC. He's always fought this way.
Yeah.
um yeah, exciting fight though. I think that they both fought well. I think they both could have gave a little bit more, but nonetheless, you
Yeah.
could tell. The thing that I love is that you could tell that they were focused, because all the talk that they said they were going to be doing, the podcasting they said that they were going to be doing inside the octagon, they left for the guys who really do it,
Yeah.
the
That
yous
was
and
funny.
eyes of the world. And I appreciate that. I love the fact that they were there to put on a show, but to
Yeah.
also give the fans what they were looking for. And you could tell
Yeah.
that they were focused on just that.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So, a fight that I think was amazing, and I'm gonna play a little something for you. You're gonna hate me for it, but it's okay because it's all in the name of brotherly love.
Yeah.
Hold on un segundo. And I would just want you to listen to the words of Mr. another Michael Bisping.
See bias there, right? But certainly, what a main card. Unbelievable action from start to finish. And action all over the globe, as I said. The most excitement that we saw all week and in recent memory, one of the best fights that you will ever see is Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus France's own Benoit Saint Denis. My God. What a fight, okay? We got to put some respect on Dustin Poirier's name. Listen, he's already respected. He was the former interim champion, okay? He's a fan favorite. He's beaten Conor McGregor twice in a row. Always shows up. Fight of the year contenders with Michael Chandler.
Okay. So the reason why I play that is because Bisping says that, you know, should Islam be next for Dustin Poirier? And he believes that Dustin Poirier is within the realm of fighting for a title. And you and I had a very, very heated debate about whether Dustin Poirier was going to was in the realm of still being able to fight for a title before his retirement. And I think that we put a measly $30 bet on the line.
Yeah, we did.
And you know how I am about my dough. I do not like losing. I do not like losing dough. So, what do you think? Do you still feel that way? And then we're gonna get into the fight. Do you still feel like Dustin Poirier retires before fighting for gold again? And actually, let me be fair. I said that it is possible for him to become champion again, or him to become undisputed champion. What do you think? Can he become undisputed champion? Did Michael Bisping just change your mind?
Uh, Not exactly. I mean, the fact that Benoit actually did expose something about Dustin, but it did allow Dustin to kind of figure out something about, can I do something here where I can't let Benoit do this to me, and I got to figure out how to turn this fight around. And well, he did, and he ended up finishing off Benoit the way he did, and I'm pretty impressed. But when it comes to becoming champion, it's kind of a tall hill to climb considering you have Islam. You do have the fact that he did lose to Oliveira and Justin Gaethje recently, and I find it hard that he may be able to get to touch gold again. But if he does somehow figure out how to beat these three guys, or simply just go straight to Islam, because sometimes they would do want to see some new matchups, and he surprises
Those
Islam.
UFC numbers.
If he does surprise Islam, hey, I'll admit I'm wrong, but I just got a feeling that Dustin Poirier, I don't think he's going to become champion before he retires, though, honestly.
You are literally my brother from another mother. You don't have to admit you're wrong. Just give me that $30. Listen, the thing that I love about who we are as best friends is that we can have these heated debates, and I think that while you love so many different sports, UFC, mixed martial arts, kind of football for me. I mean, you're into racquetball if they let you, right? So it's like,
Mm,
this is something that we have truly found our passions over, and so sometimes that leads to heated debates. But I think nonetheless, I find enjoyment in finding and taking the time to see what Dustin Poirier is truly capable of.
yeah,
If he doesn't, I will gladly hand over that $30 to you. But it's just fun seeing what the road will be for one Dustin the Diamond Poirier. Now,
yeah,
we talked about Dustin, and will does he have the gusto, the guts, the fortitude to still try to fight with the top of the division to try to get to gold? And I think he's a fighter. I think he's a warrior. But there's a time that comes for every man, especially in the spirit of competition, where you're just not you're that it is just either not your thing anymore. Or you just don't have it anymore. And I don't think that that is Dustin. I think that he isn't like the same guy that he was when he was fighting Justin Gaethje back in the day. But
yeah,
I think that he's still skillful, and I think he's now that he's gone up in weight. I think the power is something that it helps him as well.
yeah,
So we will see. But Benoit Saint Denis, for a guy who had a staph infection and was on antibiotics, I felt like he fought well. But to me, it's just like, why take the fight? And if you do take the fight, listen, give a simple statement. I had antibiotics. I didn't fight the way I wanted to fight. I'm moving on, because anything else just sounds like, it sounds like you're taking away from the fans, because you took a fight knowing that you were not at 100%, and no fighter is usually going to be at 100% when they step into the octagon, into the cage, into the smart cage, whatever it may be. 10%, 85%. There's going to be little things that are nagging you. I get that. It's part of getting beat up.
yeah,
But going into these big fights, and you severely compromised, just kind of feels, uh, you know, kind of like you're cheating the fans, right? It's like, imagine your favorite fighter is getting ready to walk in, and your hopes are riding high on that guy, and it's like, well, I had this going on, and it's like, well, then why not show up when you're in better spirits, in better health? I still felt like he fought well, but
yeah,
after hearing that, it's like, you probably know you didn't get the Benoit Saint Denis of 2 months ago.
yeah,
But I just had to play that little Michael Bisping part for you. In his opinion, it's still possible that Dustin goes for gold. Definitely a warrior, and I can appreciate that spirit. Uh, so that was the co-main event, and we're gonna move on to the main event.
yeah,
And I must first start by saying, um, wow, just absolutely wow. I did not expect Cheeto Vera to be manhandled from pillar to post, from bell to bell, from beginning to end the way that he did. It just seemed like a weird game plan. Again, regardless of if you're not so worried about hitting the nerve, it's like they completely took a lot of the leg kicks and just kicks in general out of the repertoire. They took it out of the playing card deck. I mean, it just I mean, what was going on? I get the slow start that Cheeto normally has, but it just seemed like he really didn't get started until like the last 30 seconds of the fifth round. Now, I understand that, Sean O'Malley was about as elusive as Michael Venom Page was. And the thing that I noticed the most on the night was, when Cheeto would go for his rallies, right? He would usually throw like two or three punches. He would have a kick on the end of that, and even if he went for two or three punches with a power punch on the end, whether it was like a strong right hook, it was always like at the very end of that, Sean O'Malley was a ghost in the sand and he was nowhere to be found. It was every time Cheeto would do that. And it was interesting because it was like Cheeto would get him almost backed up to the cage. And then Sean O'Malley would just slide to one side like a matador. It was beautiful to watch. And you're talking about a guy who just isn't the biggest Sean O'Malley fan, and I can say that it was just a beautiful clinic that he put on. Um, what did you think?
I was impressed with Sean O'Malley. He does have a big chip on his shoulder, knowing that Cheeto did get him the first time, but he this was a masterpiece coming from Sean O'Malley. Knew that high volume striking was going to be key here. And Cheeto, I think he was waiting for something, and he was just getting farther and farther behind with the strike volumes. And again, he just couldn't simply catch him. And Sean O'Malley just racked up a whole bunch of punches and swept him all. All three judges swept him. 5-0 for all the judges.
Yeah, yeah, just an amazing display of, his the prowess he already has displayed before. The flying knee was nasty, it was
That
beautiful, it
was
was art, it was the last parting words, Tiggy. What do you have to say about UFC 299?
that was an awesome card. I like that a lot.
All right. Well, you have been listening to the UFC 299 in review with your boy D2 Nice and Tiggy Max. We appreciate you for getting this far. If you did, make sure you smash the like button and you subscribe because we got plenty more coming on in 2024. Thanks, and we are out.